Hey everybody, welcome to my booth. I'm Jay. Happy Thursday if you're watching today or on a Thursday, and happy whatever day it is whenever you're watching. Today's sample is from Dharma. Dharma is an author, and they're just starting to narrate their own books, looking to get some feedback on performance and anything else we can give them, so we're going to do just that. Before we dive in, though, if you like the stuff and you find it helpful, you can help these efforts out and help folks find us and build our little community here by clicking the buttons, etc., blah, blah, blah. You know how YouTube works. And if you'd like to submit a sample of yours just like this, there's this form in the description. Fill it out, send me something. We'll do one of these ASAP. There's also coaching on my website if that is more your speed. With that said, spiel over. Let's take a listen.
Chapter 20. When they arrived at the hospital, Shay stashed her pistol in the Mustang's glove box. Wendy helped her limp into the emergency waiting room. The bitter smell of antiseptic hung in the air.
Okay, Dharma, I'm pausing because you'd said you were a little self-conscious about your voice. Nothing to worry about. I think it sounds great. Truly and sincerely, I'm not saying that to say that. I think you've got nothing to worry about. No need to be self-conscious about your voice here at all. Let's keep listening, and then we'll give notes. This is a pretty brief sample, so I think we can listen to the whole thing. Well, I paused it just as we had come in, so let's get the whole thing again.
When they arrived at the hospital, Shay stashed her pistol in the Mustang's glove box. Wendy helped her limp into the emergency waiting room. The bitter smell of antiseptic hung in the air. The same woman with the pale lavender bouffant hair sat behind the check-in desk. Her brow crinkled when she looked up at Shay. "Weren't you here yesterday?" "Yeah. Only now I'm the patient. Tore up my leg in a motorcycle accident." Shay gave the woman her personal information. "Have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Jessica arrived 20 minutes later. Shay gave her a kiss, savoring the scent of her perfume. "Glad you came." "Of course, sweetie." Jessica glanced down at Shay's leg. "What happened?" "Just a little road rash. Hurts, but probably not fatal." "Oh, you poor girl."
Okay, awesome. Yeah, there's a lot here that we can work with, pull out, and expand upon, but as a foundation, I think you've got a lot going on that's really, really great. My first thought is this is something that I've been talking about incidentally a fair amount with a lot of other narrators. When you shift from a section of narration into dialogue, there are a couple of things that can help you out. And some of this is specific to your sample here, Dharma, and some is just a general note for anybody else narrating an audiobook. But the narrator's voice, we'll stick with your sample first, where it's a third-person perspective narrator, and they're sort of following along with the story in that in the way you're performing it, which I think is good, they have somewhat of an emotional involvement in what's going on. An example was when you said the bitter antiseptic, the way you said the word bitter, I could feel you as the narrator sort of sympathizing or empathizing with or even experiencing the character's experience of walking into the hospital and smelling the bitter antiseptic. And that's really, really nice and something that's helpful when you're doing a third-person perspective like this. That's sort of global, and it's not necessarily a third-person close where it's tied to a specific character. So to summarize all that, as the narrator voice, it can be really, really helpful and immersive for the listener if you allow yourself to have a point of view and experience bits of the story, if the story allows for that. And I think that yours does. Now, in terms of separating narration bits from dialogue bits, to help the listener understand that we're shifting from a narration to a real lived-in space with characters interacting with each other, There are a couple tools that you can use, and one of them is as you shift from a narrator tone into dialogue, the narrator is speaking directly to the listener in pretty much all circumstances. Sometimes the narrator is talking to themselves, which in that case, the listener is in their own mind. But you're talking to the listener, and that's a pretty intimate thing. And you're telling the story like this. So for those situations, as the narrator, you could maybe even rename them as the storyteller, if that's helpful for this image. And what helps me in those circumstances is to place myself in relationship to the listener in a physical space. So if I'm telling someone a story, say, around a campfire, I may have a specific tone as to how I'm going to start telling the story and a specific projection that helps generate the atmosphere of this storytelling experience. And if I'm by someone's bedside, maybe that'll shift slightly. And you don't have to put a finger on it, but if I'm imagining myself telling this story by a bedside, by a fireside, by across the table at a cafe, whatever it may be, that helps me as the narrator establish where I am and a sort of relationship to my listener in terms of physicality and imagined physicality. By contrast, when I shift to characters talking to each other, they are living in a real world space. And I made a video about this a while ago talking about like Alien or something. But if the narrator is talking to the listener and it's this sort of intimate, almost confessional space as like a just broad stroke. If I then shift to the characters in this circumstance where they're bustling into a hospital emergency room and there's a woman across sitting at the receptionist desk and I'm coming in, as I come in, she's going to yell or speak across the receptionist counter, "Weren't you in here yesterday?" And then depending on how far away they are, say they've just come in the door and I'm like, "Oh, hey, weren't you in here yesterday?" Because they're 20 feet away or so. But if they're right at the counter, my projection might be, "Weren't you here yesterday?" Something like that. And then as the characters are, say, in the hospital bed, I can't remember where they end up at the end of this, but I'm imagining them sort of in a more intimate, close moment where one is like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And the other's, "Motorcycle accident, but it's fine. It's not going to kill me." Those can be a little bit closer in space. But my point is, narrator speaking to the listener here, characters in the world, they have a physical space that they're living within. So that helps to imagine. So that sort of shift can be helpful in delineating your characters and the movement from a narration voice to a character voice. Another thing, simply on a mechanical level, that can help or assist the listener's experience in understanding narration, dialogue, is to just give it more space between the two. So if we listen to this little section.
Her brow crinkled when she looked up at Shay. "Weren't you here yesterday?"
I can help that by just adding a little bit of air. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but by shifting, it allows my mind time to say, "Oh, we're changing something here." So if I've just added a bit of silence there.
Her brow crinkled when she looked up at Shay. "Weren't you here yesterday?"
Just a little bit of space, and let's make it even farther, see how far we can go.
Her brow crinkled when she looked up at Shay. "Weren't you here yesterday?"
So yeah, it doesn't have to be any like huge gap of space, but if I, as the narrator or the storyteller, am telling the story, she was sitting at the counter and she looked up at me and said, "Weren't you here yesterday?" I can allow time for me to sort of shift. And that's just a mechanical thing. Allow yourself space. You don't have to push through things.
"Yeah." "Weren't you here yesterday?" "Yeah."
There too. Let me just try adding a bit more space here and see how it sounds.
"Weren't you here yesterday?" "Yeah."
Yeah, so I think in general, if you're one way that I like to think about it visually speaking is if we imagine this as a movie playing out in our heads, you can think of it as different camera shots. So we're approaching the counter. Weren't you in here yesterday? Camera shot changes, and we allow a little bit of time every time a camera shot changes. Weren't you here yesterday? Camera close up on the main character. Yeah, but now I'm the patient. Camera switches back. Well, take a seat. And if you imagine those camera shifts, it can also help with your narrator's voice and tone of performance there. Let's listen to this last bit once again, because there were some ideas I had here, but I can't remember what they were.
Have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly. Jessica arrived 20 minutes later. Shay gave her a kiss, savoring the scent of her perfume. Glad you came. Of course.
So yeah, there, just again for experimentation, we'll add a bit of space.
Shay gave her a kiss, savoring the scent of her perfume. Glad you came. Of course, sweetie. Jessica glanced down.
We'll add a little bit there too.
Glad you came. Of course, sweetie. Jessica glanced down at Shay's leg. What happened? Just a little road rash. Hurts, but...
Okay, so yeah, just playing with the space there. But the thing I wanted to say was you're doing a really nice job in giving the characters performances, and this bit in particular.
Just a little road rash. Hurts, but probably not fatal.
We can feel her like wincing there, and it hurts, but it's probably not fatal, which is great. We get a sense of the character, what they're going through in that moment, which is wonderful. And I think you can just go further if you want. You're already doing a fairly good job in general. But like this character, for example.
Have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly.
If this is like the typical receptionist, it's like, weren't you here yesterday? Have a seat. You can really paint us a picture there if you want and give this character more. If you want. I don't know that that's necessarily right for this character or not. And then in this bit too.
Glad you came. Of course, sweetie.
You can go, all of it's already there, but you can go further. If the person is, glad you came. Of course, sweetie. Something like, you can just dial it up a bit, and that will do nothing but serve your story if that's something that you're interested in. But all in all, Dharma, really, really great work. And let us know where we can find your book and or books. They sound lovely and really, really exciting. I love me a good thriller. Anyway, I hope this is helpful for you and for everybody else out there. And until the next one of these, be well, everybody, and I'll see you there. Toodles.